So let's say budget-ish Fault. Because if you want to play Vitruvian, then crafting Fault is 100% worth it. So, since this is a budget deck list aimed at maybe a newer audience, we'll go through the deck in a bit of detail. Cataclysmic Fault is a really cool spell, turns the entire center column into these sand tiles. The sand tiles make a 2/2 dervish whenever you summon a minion. So basically this means you get an infinite supply of 2/2s. You get 5 of them every time you play a minion, which is probably like basically 5 a turn. Your opponent can stand on them to block them, or you can end up blocking them yourselves. It's quite easy to mess that up, but roughly speaking, Fault is going to make you about 5 creatures a turn, which is just really, really hard to beat in any sort of longish game matchup. We show that up with something of a early game kind of card draw package with the golems, and then we combo it with a card called Ray, which is a 0 mana minion that lets you activate it straight away the turn you play it. So a lot of the idea of this deck is to play Fault as early as you can and then profit from it, or you can swarm the board and beat down. There's a couple of payoff cards for Fault. The most notable one is called Kanum Ka. Now this one is unfortunately legendary, but it is my spoiler card, so I'm happy with this. Kanum Ka, basically every time it dies, it replaces another dervish that you have in play. So it doesn't, your opponent can't kill it unless you're out of dervishes, and it has rush and flying. So you can just deal 3 damage, respawn it in place of a dervish, deal 3 damage, respawn. So if you play Fault and then this summons 5 extra dervishes, so it can attack for 18 as long as it dies every time. Which, you know, against Varth or a general with buffs, they just die. And against the big board of stuff, like you're playing against Wanderer, they have 2 largest minions in play, you just kill them. And you get to keep a couple of dervishes and your Kanum Ka left over. So card is really powerful because of, well, budget reasons. We'll forgo this one, but just so you know, as you develop the deck and as you become more comfortable with it, if you decide it's something you want to keep playing, this card is absolutely worth crafting a couple copies. You don't need 3, just 2 will do. And obviously 1 is a start. They do kind of clog up your hand early on. They're much better once you have Fault, but the card is really good and well worth a look. Fault without Ka is a big no. I mean, I played it before Ka came out and it was great. We need this Ray. Ray is good. We're just going to have to look for other payoffs, and what that probably means is improving the early game. So Fault's normal weakness is that it kind of has like a bad 3 and 4 mana spot on the curve, because a lot of its good cards are 2-drops, which we'll get to in a minute with all the golems, 5-drop Vitruvian removal and Fault. So there's kind of a bit of a gap. They play like Spelljammer and stuff, but it's not incredible. Spamanoob has a really nice way to fix this by playing Portal Guardians, which I think we can include. Portal Guardians is very strong. It's an epic, but hopefully not too far outside the budget. We can maybe play 2 copies instead of 3. I'm very new to Duelist. You all seem so smart. Oh, don't worry about it. You definitely get the hang of it. Like, this game, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of detail. I'm very comfortable with this game and card games in general because I've been playing them for a long time. So the normal way to make Fault decks work, in most Vitruvian decks, there's kind of 2 choices of early game. You can play Obelisks or you can play Golems. Obelisks are more powerful if your opponent doesn't have specific answers to them. They're a bit worse as just being generic bodies, and they don't get to draw you cards. Golems gain access to Dream Shaper, which is a cheap body that draws 2 cards. It helps you filter through your deck. You can play a 2-drop and then play another 2-drop and then replace them in your hand so you don't run out of cards for playing early game minions and swarming the board. So it helps with card advantage, and it helps with it helps with actually finding your Faults and your Rays. So we really want all the cheap golems that are worth playing. There's the main package is Dream Shaper, Celebrant, which also helps us ramp, so we can sometimes sneak in a cheeky early Fault or play a 5-drop ahead of time, and Golem Metallurgist. And we don't generally need to play others, like Skyrock Golem sucks, Bloodshard Golem sucks, Vanquisher is sometimes okay, but wants big golems, and Hailstone Golem is where it starts to get a bit expensive. Sometimes people play EMP, which is also a golem. But the card it's mostly a tech card. It's not really necessary, and it's a bit expensive. Another option is Sirocco, which pays you off for playing lots of golems, and in those lists you maybe want hailstones, but Sirocco is not played in most fault lists. You can add Adjudicator for earlier fault. I was actually considering Mana Forger. I'll see if there's slots for it. The next thing we're going to want to do is, well, there's two things. We want to fill out our mid-game and sort of flesh out the curve, and we want to make sure we can draw cards and interact with the opponent. The last one's the interacting bit's the easy bit. Vitruvian has two very, very strong removal spells at 5 mana, which are both low in rarity. The Sandswell Reader. This card is amazing. You will play it in every Vitruvian deck. And Blood of Air, which has the exact same description. Both of these cards don't destroy minions, so you avoid Dying Wish effects. They're very efficient. They can deal with arbitrarily large minions. Sandswell Reader gives them their minion back, but puts a sand tile and a body into play. Blood of Air can remove something permanently and also kill something else along the way. Of note, if your opponent's hand is full, like say they're playing a trial deck, so they started with a full hand or they've been drawing a lot of cards, and you bounce something with Sandswell Reader, it will just disappear. So you get to play a 3/3 and just like remove their thing, which is amazing. You may be starting to see the problem with the typical fault curve, because like this, the fault deck is basically this and filler, and like Kunumkar, which is also expensive. And then sometimes people play like bigger bomby minions to help deal with Wanderer, and sometimes people play like cheaper minions or healing or whatever. But fundamentally there's this huge gap in the middle, so we're going to try and fill that in an efficient way. Blistering Scorn is quite a common card. This thing is just handy. It kills eggs, it kills Jack's True Sight, it kills Heartseekers. It's worth including a couple copies. It also helps us make good early game trades. Scion's First Wish helps us dig. Can buff up our golems, because they're kind of crappy and small, to trade with more important minions. And it helps us, again, motor through the deck, keep that card velocity going so we can find our faults when we need them. So First Wish is good. Now, it's starting to look a little bit better. The curve's filling up, but we're still kind of lacking. What sort of card draw options do we have that are lowish in rarity that we're not already playing? Windstrike is bad, let's ignore that. Blazehound is okay. Normally you aren't really going to be wanting to draw your opponent cards. Architect is a little slow for our purposes. Sojourner though is lovely. Normally Spelljammer is the card draw minion of choice, but she's a legendary. Although if you are looking for legendaries to craft, Spelljammer, like probably the most played legendary in the game. Like it goes in a lot of decks. Basically anything that isn't too high on the curve can play it. It's got a good body. It draws you a card straight away, so you kind of, your opponent feels obliged to remove it so it doesn't hit them in the face. But it also, then they get card advantage. You get card advantage if they do that. So we're not going to do that though. We're just going to play Sojourner, who is cheaper, which is good, and very good with buff spells. We might want to look for some more buffs alongside the First Wish, but we'll see how that goes. It looks like it's kind of it, but with Dream Shaper and Sojourner we should be okay. So now we still want to flesh out this middle bit of the curve. We want some healing. Wouldn't mind having some extra like early removal for problematic early game things, and it'd be good to have some guarantee that we can actually win the game if we don't draw fault. So maybe we want some extra threats that are a bit higher up the curve, maybe on the 4 or 5, to help get the help like repeatedly get damage in. Maybe we do want Blazehound. Kind of like the idea of playing Blazehound and like burn spells in this deck actually, but that's probably unnecessary. Bone Swarm is good early removal as well as chip damage. I like Bone Swarm a lot. Get a couple of those in. Some obelisks. Most of the obelisks don't really fit what we're doing here. Scion's Second Wish is a good option. It's really good with Sojourner, and it's good at buffing up our crappy minions and making them hit face. So that might be a good option. We'll come back to that. Fireblaze Obelisk makes your Fault Dervishes hit harder, but that's not as exciting as playing Kanumkar by a margin. Portal Guardian. Portal Guardian is a big boy. and smooths our curve out really nicely. Skippy is also a good one. There's a kind of minion that's good at fighting and trading, can help us get like janky artifacts to help kill extra things. Blood to Air we have already. Yes, I quite like the idea of Second Wish. I think I want to put a couple of Portal Guardians in. This card is pretty sick. Does some fun things. These cards are all a bit niche. Wasteland Wraith is quite good in this deck, but again, a little bit niche. Fifth Canopic is pretty good as like a big thing. If you're okay with crafting the epics. Starfire Scarab is not a terrible option, but we don't really need more 5-drops. If I'm going to play another 5-drop, I think it's probably Dancing Blades. The other option actually is just to put in like Primus Shieldmaster or some other similar good stuffy 4-drop, because we do need extra 4-drops here to help us curve out. Maybe we do want Hailstone Golem. We could do a Hailstone Golem and like... oh yeah, that's a thought. What if we play Hailstone and Boulder Breacher, which will allow us to get off big attacks with our smallish minions for better trades. Yeah, I quite like that actually. So play some Hailstones and 2 Boulder Breacher. And now we have extra bodies. The curve is looking mostly okay. We still got a bit of a hump towards the 5. Maybe we want to put in some extra stuff down early on. Is Falkius still relevant? Falkius isn't amazing, but we could play it. It's an option. Gust's an epic, so I want to stray away from the higher rarity cards. But maybe I will put in the 3rd Portal Guardian. That way we have Fault as a legendary, Portal Guardian is an epic, and everything else is common or rare. Some of them are even basic cards. And all of them are like cards you will use, apart from Ray, I guess, which is only good with Fault, but a lot of these are cards that you will just use. Like Hailstone Golem you have already. Scorn is amazing. Sojourn is amazing. These golems show up in a lot of different decks. And they're all common. Oh, they're not all commons. These two are rares. But Dream Shaper is common and is great in Vitruvian decks. Like this will allow you... This kind of golem core will allow you to experiment flexibly in a lot of different ways. Like it's good in basically every deck. Whether it's control, aggression, anything. Yeah, let's just jam in the 3rd Portal Guardian. And see how that works out. So the curve is... okay, it's not too bad. We don't have any healing, which is a potential issue. So we may want to chuck in some Azure Heralds later. We don't have Scion's Second Wish, which I would quite like, but I think Bone Swarm is probably more important. And I think having some kind of largish 5-drop is a good idea. So let's run with this for now. And cards like Azure Herald are quite easy to tech in if you find that you're... you know, the ladder around you is too aggressive or you're dying too easily. Fault is aggressive enough and proactive enough that you can probably get away without it.